This is Here's How, Ireland's political, social and current affairs podcast, presented by William Campbell.
Thank you for downloading episode 112 of Here's How for the 1st of October 2020. There's a whole Monty Python film's worth of new political groups on the far right. In this podcast, I talk to the leader who says his party isn't one of them.
Here's How is Ireland's political, social and current affairs podcast. Make your view heard. Just dial 076 603 5060 and tell the world what you're thinking. Your voicemail may be included in the next podcast. You can find tips on recording your contribution and other ways to contact the show at here'show.ie/call.
Coming up on today's podcast.
When you deny a person's rights to be able to speak peacefully and respectfully in the democratic forum, you actually create anger and you create stress.
But hold on for a second, Patter, you're deputy leader. Your deputy leader made a very explicit claim that the health service are fraudulently telling people that people are dying of COVID-19 when they're not.
I will get to that, I promise. But I want to make one point. There is a big danger.
That's coming up shortly. But first, I want to thank all of my donors on Patreon. I really appreciate everyone who does that. For the people who don't know, Patreon is a website that allows people to donate $1 or $2 per podcast or per month. And that helps me to devote more time to research and finding interesting guests. If you think that you could do the same as them, there's details on the website and at the end of the show. I don't normally do pre-buttals on a podcast interview, but I think that in this case it's important because in the context of the coronavirus and COVID-19, it's just not acceptable to allow incorrect scientific claims to go unchallenged, even for a few minutes. There are a couple of things said in this interview that I wasn't able to correct in the moment, and I don't want to leave the correction to the end because that runs the risk that people will hear the incorrect claim and not the correction. So, two things. First up is a claim made by Dr. Anne McCluskey, the deputy leader of Aontú, that, quote, anyone who had a temperature or a cough prior to their death, no matter what else was wrong with them, was to be counted as a COVID death. I have investigated this with the NHS in Northern Ireland. Dr. Anne McCluskey is based in Derry, but she was the Aontú candidate in Sligo Leitrim in the general election. I've investigated with the Statistics Agency in Northern Ireland and with the HSE in the Republic. All of them are clear that this is not the way that deaths from COVID-19 are classified. The HSE have confirmed to me that there are 3 classifications. So number 1 is a confirmed COVID-19 death, where lab tests confirm the infection either before or after death. Number 2 is a probable COVID-19 death, where a person dies with an infection meeting the COVID-19 case definition. And number 3 is a possible or suspected COVID-19 death, where patients have symptoms clinically compatible with COVID-19, such as people with a pending lab test or who are part of an infection cluster such as at a care home, and where there's no clear alternative cause of death. So there are clear guidelines on classifying deaths, and the idea that hundreds of doctors were given a secret order to falsify death records, and the only one who has mentioned this in public is Dr. Anne McCluskey, that just isn't credible. The second issue that I want to clarify is that during the interview, Pader Tobin says that the government changed its mind on the efficacy of face masks, first saying that they didn't work, then saying that they do. That isn't true. At the start of the crisis, there was a critical shortage of face masks and other protective gear called PPE. And the government said that they did not want the general public to use up masks that were in short supply and needed by medical staff. So the government did change the position on masks, but not from saying that they didn't work to saying that they do. They changed from saying that they were in short supply and needed by medics to, when more supplies came online, saying that everyone should wear them when possible. Anyway, Here's the interview.
Do you agree? Do you disagree? If you want your point of view heard, dial 076 603 5060 and leave a contribution for the show. The lines are open 24/7 and you can find tips on how to record a good contribution and other ways to contact the podcast at here'show.ie/call.
The Aontú party was founded by Peadar Tóibín. Peadar Tóibín was elected for Sinn Féin in 2011 and 2016, and after that election he left Sinn Féin largely over the abortion issue and founded Aontú. And Peadar joins me on the line now. Peadar, what's Aontú for?
Well, Aontú is a 32-county, All-Ireland Republican party, and we're dedicated to Irish reunification, to economic justice, to protecting life of everybody, and also making sure that people have a voice in Leinster House and in Stormont, because there is a groupthink in Ireland at the moment which does not allow for dissenting voices, for questioning voices, and we in Aontú hope to give representation to people who have different views than, let's say, the mainstream. We would be a grassroots political organisation. We're very much focused on building up a membership base across the country. We have over 1,000 members. We have functioning common, about 60 functioning common across the country, and we want to build and work on the grassroots upwards. We want a democratic party. A lot of the political parties at the moment are not democratic in their structures anymore, and we're trying to create that.
And are you on the left or the right?
We will be left of centre economically, for sure. We want a prosperous country. We want people to do well for themselves. When people invest or they spend time in education or they work hard, or they take risks, people should see a good economic reward for that type of activity. If you don't have that spark in an economy, you don't have a functioning economy. But we do want to see a safety net also for people in difficult times around housing, around healthcare and education. We believe in a mixed economy economically. There are things that the private sector is, far superior at delivering. There are things that the public sector is far superior at delivering. And there are other sectors like housing, for example, that need a healthy private sector and a healthy public sector too.
Okay, you said there at the start that you want to question things, provide a voice for people who don't accept the status quo. But after that, is there anything that you said that a Fianna Fáil politician or a Fine Gael politician couldn't have said?
Well, I suppose, first of all, I believe that Fianna Fáil is an ideological husk, politically speaking, at the moment.
Sure, yeah, but I don't want to talk about Fianna Fáil. I want to talk about Aontú. And you make a good point, and I think you're possibly correct that Fianna Fáil is a husk is a good word for it. It's empty. But the question I asked was, did you say anything that a Fianna Fáiler couldn't say?
Yeah, for example, most Fianna Fáil TDs currently won't come down strongly on a range of different issues.
For example?
And euthanasia is another example where right now there's a bill from People Before Profits, Solidarity, in front of the Dáil that seeks to allow for assisted suicide. And it'll reach second stage shortly. But
you're opposed to that, I take it?
We are opposed to it for various reasons.
Okay, let's just park that issue and accept that. We can come back to that. And, of course, you were founded very much...
But there's an example, if you like, of Fianna Fáil unwilling and unable anymore, paralysed, if you like, to be able to come down strongly with regard to any of their values.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point, Peadar. That's a good point, and I'll make it to Fianna Fáil when I have them on. But I want to focus on Aontú. Apart from that, and what is broadly called the pro-life issues, is there anything that you would say that a Fianna Fáiler couldn't say?
Well, another example would be for over the last number of years, there has been an effort to delete the ethos of schools across the country. So currently, schools.
You know what, Peadar? I have heard the expression "the ethos of a school" so many times, and I've never come across somebody who's been able to explain what that means.
Well, the ethos is very simple. You can look the word up in the dictionary. Ethos
but no, I'm not looking for the values. Like, so when I'm learning, if I have my kid, if I have my kid who's doing the geography lesson or the maths lesson, how would the ethos might the ethos be different, or how might that influence how they're taught or what they're taught?
Yeah, well, with regards, let's say, geography and maths, etc., the ethos of a school might come into the fact that a school is very much in favor of, let's say, fair trade. A school might be very much in favor of making sure that there is decent trade within countries, that countries are not involved in, let's say, the use of sweatshops. They're not involved. For example, China currently, there's a lot of allegations that materials being made in China currently.
How does that impact the maths lesson?
Well, you asked about you mentioned geography and maths, so I'm addressing part of your question there. So, with regards to geography, if you're in a secondary school and you're learning about the geopolitical realities of this world, the ethos of a particular school can allow you to see the world in a particular way. And you may question, what does ethos mean? But at least half the country are very sure of their ethos. So they're very sure of how they want to raise their children, the values that they want to be able to raise their children. Now, I'm not saying for a second.
I think, Pater, that most people would say they want their teachers to teach, not to preach.
Oh, I agree. But I honestly believe that you can't have a value-free education. And it's funny. I read recently about scientists who are involved in the creation of the machinery that was used in World War II to exterminate the Jews, but the engineers that built the camps around the shocking Holocaust. And education for education's sake, without value, can be a dangerous thing. And we need to be able to raise a generation of people who have excellence in maths and geography, as you mentioned, but have a value system in which they can understand the world and make sure that their skills are used for positive, life-affirming aspects. And there's no such thing as a value-free system. There are different values. Now, we in Aontú are not saying that one value should be better than the other, or the state should choose one value system over any other. All we're simply saying at the moment is we're saying that parents should have a right to choose the ethos. We are pluralists at heart, and one of the problems in many ways in modern societies, Ireland is very like the 1950s right now. We're probably at the most uniform in common discussion in Ireland than we have been since the 1950s, and that there's this push towards uniformity from many elements of the state. And we believe of the republicanism of Wolfe Tone, that Catholic, Protestant, dissenter, Muslim, Jewish, people of no faith or no religion should all be able to exist in the common public space without fear or favor, to be able to live their lives according to their own
let me ask you a specific question on that. Let me ask you a specific question on that, because in your constituency, in Meath East, and in many places across the country, Meath West, it's fairly typical that there are small towns that have basically one school. And in the overwhelming majority of cases, that one school is controlled by the Roman Catholic Church. And very, very often, they will take actions that really can't be described as anything other than mean-spirited and vindictive. For example, placing the religion lesson right in the middle of the day rather than at the start, at the beginning, and insisting that any parent who doesn't want their children to be given Catholic religious instruction must come in the middle of the day, obviously very difficult for any working parent, take their child out, provide childcare for their child for 1 hour in the middle of the day, every day of the week. That type of behaviour may well come under scrutiny. That's the sort of thing that, where a school is being, every taxpayer is funding that school. That type of thing should be prohibited, shouldn't it?
So first of all, I believe that a significant proportion of the schools within the country should be returned to the, let's say, the state's fully state education system from the Catholic system. So the Catholic Church should divest.
So you're saying that, no, hold on for a second, because I want to be clear. You're saying that if you have a practicing Catholic family who live next door and maybe the kids are friends,
I think it might be easier for you to understand what I'm saying if you let me finish the sentence.
Well, no, hold on. Let me get this scenario, because the family that they live next door.
No, you've already painted the scenario. You've asked me the question of the scenario.
Go ahead, then
I'm
I'll
a
answer.
quarter way through answering it.
Go ahead, and then I'll ask.
So what we're saying is that the Church should divest itself from more schools than it currently has. It has far too much control over too many schools in the country to allow for proper pluralism. The weird thing is, a number of years ago, the Church did try to divest itself from a large number of schools, and actually a lot of parents complained about it and said they didn't want the Church to leave those schools. Now, I have two siblings actually who are teachers in the education system, and contrary to the picture you've painted, it's actually quite the opposite. There's people from different faith backgrounds. In one particular school I know of, there's a lot of Muslim children there. Mm-hmm. They're very welcome. The school is very, very, let's say, open. They mark Muslim faith occasions in their materials and in their classes. And they actually also ensure that the children have an opportunity not to participate in specifically Catholic objectives. So what I'm saying is that the experience of most people is very far from the picture that you painted. It's actually far more pluralist, even in Catholic schools currently. And what I'm suggesting is that the current system is not good enough. We need to divest more schools into the secular system fully so that we can have full pluralism.
Let me explain then why I think, not on your part, but on the part of perhaps the Catholic school management, a dishonest way of doing that. Because most kids want to go to school where their friend from next door goes to school. And it is divisive to say that you, Johnny, in number 21, you go to the Catholic school because your parents are Catholic, and you, Mary, in number 22, you go to the non-religious school because your parents are non-religious. What's wrong with this system? The taxpayer is paying for all of the schools. Why can't everyone go to the same school?
Well, I suppose, first of all, it's a flip.
And be treated equally respectfully.
About 95% of schools in Ireland are Catholic. So in 95% of the school education system, children are not divided in any ways in going to the schools. So
yes, and if parents don't want their children to be given Catholic religious instruction with, as you say, a wink at multiculturalism and some Muslim religious instruction as well, if they, which is, by a wide margin, the second largest religious group in Ireland is non-religious by a very wide margin.
Sure.
And
so can I just
what is wrong then with the model? It seems to me that the Catholic management are trying to forestall a model whereby everybody can go to the same school, and any religious group that wants to give instruction to children of that religious group can have, for example, Wednesday afternoons to do that. What's wrong with that model?
First of all, I don't agree with your political view, first of all. What I will say is that Aontú's position is that we want to see the divestment of far more schools from the Catholic system to the secular system.
How much is far more?
We would like to see, right now it's about 96, we would like to see the Catholic school education reflect the numbers of people who declare themselves as Catholics in the census. So that's, I think, it's about 70% at the moment. So the second point that we're trying to say is, because of pluralism gives parents the choice in which school to send their kids to. The opinion that you have and that you're putting forward there is that choice be taken off all parents around the country, and that all parents would say would be going back to the 1950s and have a state uniformity imposed upon them against their will. And we don't want to go back to the 1950s, and I think that once you have a state imposing their standards on top of parents against their will.
For clarity for the listeners, you're comparing the state-imposed Catholicism that you say was there in the 1950s, probably correctly. You're comparing that with a non-religious school. You're saying that that's a state-imposed
I'm comparing with a denial of choice from parents. And to be honest...
Okay, but pause with that word choice. That word choice is very important, because It's a fairly common thing to say, oh, parents want choice. That's rubbish. Parents don't want choice. Parents want to send their children to the best school. They don't want to choose between the best and not the best school. All parents want to send their kids to the best school, and they don't particularly want to have religious indoctrination that they don't believe in enforced when they're doing that.
But the two last statements you've made stand in full contradiction of each other. A few minutes ago, you said that parents want to be able to send their kids to a school that doesn't have, as you called it, a wink to multi-denominationalism, but has Catholic education. And now you're saying, well, actually,
no, I didn't say that.
That element is not important, but it's actually the quality of the education that's important. I would actually say it's a mix. And to be honest, it's never one thing. There's never silver bullets in any aspect of politics. Decisions and solutions are a mix of different elements. Parents want choice. They also want a high-quality education system. We can do that in this country through pluralism. Pluralism is very much at the heart of a liberal democracy. And I think that this idea that we should ditch a liberal democracy, go to a uniform space where nobody has choice in the public sphere anymore, I think that's a negative thing. And that's one of the reasons I actually think that there's an energized extreme right developing in Ireland and an energized extreme left. We're actually getting into very, very divisive, radicalized territory politically here in this country, nearly mimicking what's happening in the United States. And I think that the pluralism that is at the heart of who Aontú is a solution to try and reduce the energy that's going into that mix. It's amazing.
Pause with that. We've spent quite a lot of time on that, and I don't want to spend the whole interview on that. But you did mention the energized extreme right. What's your view of them?
Well, I'm radically opposed to the extreme right and the extreme left in this country.
But pause. It's the extreme right has become, in perhaps very small numbers, but they've certainly shown more energy in the past year than they have in many previous years. And there are a number of small organisations. Your party is small. You got about 1.9% in the general election, but there's a couple of parties that got, 0.2 or so of a vote in that election. But they seem to be able to bring some numbers of people onto the streets, and they seem to have a fairly active online community. And I'm just wondering, would you feel like entirely disassociating with yourself from those? Would you say that you would not agree to have any association with them whatsoever, or is there some overlap?
Of course, we'd have no association with them whatsoever. We would disagree with them radically in so many spaces. And in economic terms, for example, we're for a mixed economy. We're for the state participating where it's needed. On the environment, we believe in, that there is man-made global warming, and we want to see that ameliorated. We believe that we are at a mass extinction point in species in the planet, and we have to protect those species. We believe that, that there has to be a liberal democracy where an individual's rights are protected by the state. I
get that. You're distancing yourself.
In total, we oppose. Yeah.
I get that. You're distancing yourself entirely from them. That's perhaps there might be some. There might be some. I want to give you a chance to do that, because you'll be aware that perhaps on the left wing chatter there is some attempt to associate you as one of those slew of groups, and it is notable that one feature of all of those groups, they tend to mix and match a little bit with the conspiracy theories, but they do tend to rely pretty heavily on conspiracy theory thinking to marshal their troops. And I want to ask you particularly about, am I correct in thinking that Dr. Anne McCluskey, the councillor in Derry, is your party's deputy leader?
Yes, Anne is our deputy leader.
Okay. Anne McCluskey has told a meeting earlier this month, this is September, she said she attacked the media for their coverage of the COVID-19 crisis. She said that the health service had, and she wasn't clear whether she was talking about the north or the south, but I've checked both, and she said that the rules that anyone who had a temperature or a cough prior to their death, no matter what else was wrong with them, was counted as a COVID death. And her position seems to be that the true number of deaths from COVID-19 is dramatically lower than what's announced. Now, I've checked both with the health service in Northern Ireland and the HSE, and they have said very clearly they do not recognise that as their methodology. That's pretty close to the sort of conspiratorial thinking that the people like iRexit and Gemma O'Doherty are giving out on their YouTube channels and so forth.
I think what you're doing is very dangerous, because what you're doing is you're saying that anybody who questions in this country, anybody who wants to involve in dissent or discourse, is far right or extreme. And by doing that, what you're saying to
No, I'm not saying that, but make your point in any case.
No, you had a long section there. By saying that, you're actually saying to middle ground Irish people, if you have a different view to us, you are in the extreme. And do you know what that does to people? No, because that makes people feel that they have to shut up and be quiet. Because if they raise their voice in any of these issues, they will be considered extreme. And when you do that to people, when you deny a person's right to be able to speak peacefully and respectfully in the democratic forum, you actually create anger and you create stress.
But hold on for a second, Pader, your deputy leader, made a very explicit claim that the health service are fraudulently telling people that people are dying of COVID-19 when they're not.
I will get to that, I promise. But I want to make one point. There is a big danger in political commentators and elements of the media saying to Middle Ireland that if you don't agree with us, you're an extremist. And being able to speak publicly is a great vent. It releases tensions. Even hearing your views in the public forum it reduces the level of tension. But when you say to people, you're an extremist for having a particular view, you're actually pushing people to the extreme. Now, in relation to Dr. Anne McCluskey, actually returned to the health service in the north of Ireland out of retirement due to the COVID crisis because she felt there was a need to fight this terrible illness. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the statistics, 1,700 at least people, according to NEFIT, have died of COVID in this state. Now, the CSO have stated that the level of excess deaths in the state in that period of time is between 850 and 900. So the level of excess deaths that have happened in the state and the level of people who have been reported to die of COVID in exactly the same period of time don't match. They're half of each other. And Deputy McCluskey spent 96% of that speech talking about the fact that people who have cancer, people who have mental health issues, people who have heart
hold on for the 96%. I'm sure she could have talked about a lot of things, but she made an explicit... Hold on, Pader. She made an explicit accusation against the health service that they were fraudulently counting deaths as not... I've got the text in front of me from the Derry Journal, from the Derry Daily, excuse me.
What she said in that statement was that people's deaths were being apportioned to COVID without necessarily them having a COVID test, but because they had symptoms that were similar to COVID. And that's what she was saying. She literally said that in her practical
I'm sorry, Pader, you can't reassess what she said. I've got a direct quote, in quotation marks, from the Derry Daily. It says, open quotes, the rules were that anyone who had a temperature or a cough prior to death, no matter what else was wrong with them, was counted as a COVID death. That's an explicit charge of fraud against the health service. Do you stand over that statement? Do you stand over that statement?
No, I don't stand over. And
has she been disciplined in the party? Has Dr. McCluskey been disciplined?
No, we're not a dictatorship. We don't believe in dictatorships.
Okay, well, hold on then. I just want you just listen to this. Listen to this one clip for a second.
Hold on one second. I don't want us to talk over each other. It'd be good if we had an equal space to converse, because when you make a serious charge, you've got to let me have an opportunity to reply to it. Now, I came from a party, which I was well over 20 years in where you weren't allowed to have a different view, where if you did express a different view, you were significantly, obviously, disciplined for it. And I often felt in that political party that when you're at meetings, that people were speaking from nearly the same textbook. Now, I don't agree with Anne McCluskey's analysis of COVID. As a party, we don't agree with Anne McCluskey's analysis of COVID. We're saying to people, this is a significant
Hold on, Pader. I think what you're saying is completely invalid. No, Pader, this is completely invalid. And let me address why I think it is. Because she's entitled to her own opinion. She's not entitled to her own facts.
Well, first of all, she is entitled to her own opinion, and she has worked in the health service in the north of Ireland.
That's not an opinion claim; it's a fact claim.
She has worked in the hospitals dealing with COVID. She has seen people die in the north of Ireland, and she is speaking from first-hand experience. Okay. Now, the other point that I want to make is our political party has room for different views. It is not a mortal
thing. That is a diversion. This is not a different view. This is different facts.
It's not a diversion. You asked, have we disciplined?
No, she's making a fact claim.
Said, no,
she's making a fact claim, which is an extremely serious charge against the health service, that they are fraudulently reporting.
She's making a claim on the back of her own experience in the hospital.
She is saying that there are rules exist in the health service that tell doctors they must classify something as a COVID death when it is not. I've actually looked it up. I've got it from their website and been in touch with the health service both in the north and in the south. And they're very, very clear that the medical practitioner must write on the death certificate what, to the best of their knowledge and belief, is the cause of death. Anne McCluskey is saying that that's a lie.
Well, all I'm saying to you is this, right? Anne is speaking from her own personal experience in the hospitals herself. And
has you evidence of this?
I want to reiterate the party doesn't agree with Anne's analysis on COVID-19. The party has
you've said that.
We want. No.
I want you to listen to this clip in that case.
Face masks. These face masks are the most important, powerful public health tool we have. If we did it for 6, 8, 10, 12 weeks, we'd bring this pandemic under control. These actually, we have clear scientific evidence they work, and they are our best defense.
That's Dr. Robert Redfield. He is the director of the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control in the United States, and he was excoriated by Donald Trump for saying that because Donald Trump's ideology doesn't suit wearing face masks. Are you on the side of Donald Trump and Anne McCluskey, or are you on the side of the science?
Well, first of all, we are on the side of face masks, and we encourage people
Anne McCluskey has said that wearing a face mask is like using a sheep fence to stop a mosquito.
I don't want to be rude. I don't.
Go ahead then.
Both of us should try not to be rude, okay? We support face masks fully.
Who's we?
Aontú support face masks fully. We want people to wear face masks on public transport and in shops in the way that the government wants people to wear them. And, you know, it's interesting because I went to meetings of the leaders of the political parties in Leinster House for months, calling on the governments to bring in regulations, getting people to wear face masks. And the government said, no, face masks don't work. The government said, actually, face masks are more dangerous than not wearing face masks. The chief medical officer,
is that on the record?
Houlihan, oh, absolutely. The chief medical officer himself
said when was that?
In April of this year, said that the scientific evidence on face masks was equivocal. That was exactly the same. He said some people believe they're good and some people believe they're bad. And what you're suggesting is that if a person, a scientist, a doctor, says they mightn't work, you're suggesting that they're far out extreme. And all I'm saying
I didn't. No, she did not say that. No, she did not say that. She was utterly explicit in saying that they are useless.
Yes. Yeah, but again, the kernel of your political question here is to say that people who don't hold your view or my view are extremists.
No, I never used the word extremist.
You likened her to Donald Trump, and all I'm saying to you is, don't pigeonhole and box people with different views to you into these boxes, because you're not actually. It doesn't solve the differences we have in society by calling other people names. It actually just makes
I didn't call anybody names.
The division even. Well, you asked, were you on the side of Donald Trump or on the side of that scientist?
The CDC, yes.
And Trump, as you know, would be considered by most right-thinking people to be quite extreme in the way that he carries on.
Okay, I want to tell you what I'm getting at. I think you're misunderstanding what I'm saying. Go ahead.
One more point. The world is not as binary as your questions are making out. There is a whole spectrum of people with different views. And you know what? In a liberal democracy, that's okay.
Okay, what I want to do then is, and I don't know what your educational background is, but it has been observed that TDs, politicians in most countries, overwhelmingly come from an arts background, and this has a deleterious effect on science communication to politicians because they're overwhelmingly lawyers, is by far the biggest group, and their position, and perhaps this touches on yourself as well, the way that they view the world is arguing this point against that point back and forward. But when it comes to science, the reality is some things are known to be true and some things are known to be untrue. And it is not true to say that opinion A and opinion B is valid in a liberal arts discussion. And therefore the same must be true when you're talking about science. In some cases in science, not always, but in some cases, opinion A is wrong and B is right, and that's the end of it. Would you accept that that's true when you're talking about science?
But science is based on the fact that people challenge each other's findings.
Yes, but at
Science
the end of the day, the sun rises in the
prove.
east, and anybody who says the sun rises in the west is just plain wrong.
Absolutely, but there is hundreds
and there's
of
no
fields.
need to have respect for their opinion.
Wait, there's hundreds of fields in which scientists disagree with each other. And I'll be honest with you, this is a new disease. This disease is not a year old. We do not know all the facts about this. And that's one of the reasons why we in Aontú are saying, be careful about what we do with this, because we still don't know the behavior of this. A few months ago, in this country,
pause on that, because I want to
children were not allowed to go to school.
Yes.
Children were not allowed to go to school because children were considered to be the vectors of this. And 2 months later, we're told that children is the opposite to being vectors of this. And you know what? We'll be told stuff about this disease within 2 months that we don't know, that will actually go against what we've been told so far.
Oh, okay. I want to pause on that. And you will be aware that some of the micro parties on the far right, particularly what's called the iRegsit Freedom Party, which is a pro-Brexit party, and another one called ACI, which is Gemma O'Doherty and John Waters' outfit, they promote essentially anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. One in particular is what's called the Great Replacement Theory, that supposedly Jews who control the world are in some way want to replace the population of Western Europe with Arab people from North Africa. Now that doesn't make any sense at all, but that's what they're saying. I would almost feel embarrassed in asking you, and I don't think there's any need. I'm sure you would entirely reject those type of anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. But
can I make just one brief point on that? Yes. One brief point on that. We believe that we all live under the same sky.
Okay, that's fine, and I accept that. But what I think is perhaps the danger for Aontú here that you may not have realised is that those anti-mask conspiracy theories, which it appears that your deputy leader is at least tilting towards, they click very neatly into much darker conspiracy theories. And you don't have to go too many clicks away from an Anne McCluskey comment to get to a comment to say that, for example, Jews want to make white people into slaves, and that's the purpose of masks. And
that's incredible.
It is incredible, and I'm glad you're laughing, and I'm not for a moment suggesting that you're on that. But if, for example, somebody rang you up and said, I support the iRegsit party, or I support Gemma O'Doherty, but they're not running in my constituency, should I vote for Aontú instead? What would you say?
Well, first of all, can I tell you that we suffer phenomenal abuse from Gemma O'Doherty's party and
not the only one.
Regularly on social media. So our party has been lied about consistently about those organizations. Those organizations are disreputable to the nth degree. I would advise nobody to go next now or near them politically as such. And can I say that I have a Jewish man working in my office, and even to pose such a question on a person like myself, who has, worked with people from all over the world, with lots of groups of people who, has worked.
I accept that. I accept that completely. Pater, I totally accept your bona fides on that. But what I'm really wondering is, are you not uncomfortable with being close to that?
See, we're not close to it, and any assertion that we are close to it is either foolishly wrong or is negative on purpose. So, you know what I mean? Any person who would, even use the word us being close to them, is looking to do damage, politically speaking, I would say.
But those supporters of those organisations were cheering on Anne McCluskey. You do not get
I'll give you an example.
Shiver when you see that?
People used to say to me, they said, Pather, you're a pro-life party. And they say that the DUP are a pro-life party, so you're like the DUP.
Yeah, that's clearly muddle thinking. Look, that's muddle thinking.
But to a certain extent,
but just because somebody once said something wrong doesn't mean everything everybody says is wrong.
Yeah. So in other words, politics is a spectrum. There are people right across the spectrum who share views. There will be people in Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, Labour and the other political parties who all share views with some of those organisations. But I will say, and this is really important, I do want this to come across, one of the dangers we have in Ireland is that if we don't give a voice to Middle Ireland, if we say to Middle Ireland, you can't talk about these things.
Hold on a second.
We have the
Padder, you got 1.9% of the vote. Whose voice are you giving?
No, I'm just saying to people like who might have, let's say, concerns around issues such as face masks or the severity of the lockdown. There's a lot of really important.
Sure, yes, I actually agree. I agree with you on that point. That you have to give voice to the people who allow people to ask questions and so forth. I would say,
because
I would say
you
that's distinctly different.
The hands of
I guess I agree with you on that. And even if people, the only stupid question is the question you never asked. And I agree. I think you've made a good point on that, and I agree with that. But I would draw a very clear distinction between asking questions, even asking stupid questions, and making bold statements. For example, accusing the health service of fraud on death certificates. But just one point I want to ask you. Were you very disappointed with the election result?
No, we were very happy with the election result. We are a party that's about 18 months old. We've come from nowhere. We were told that it is impossible to develop a new political party in this country. It just wasn't going to happen. We were told that there was no space for us in the political spectrum. And yet, north and south, over 50,000 people voted for Aontú in an election that happened within a year of our existence. And,
to be clear, you got 1.9%.
We got 1.9% of the vote. And when I joined Sinn Féin in 1998, Sinn Féin had 2% of the vote. They had one TD and they had a handful of councillors. And I tell you, the level of work and organisational development that has happened around the country, and if you look in the current polls, most of the current polls are holding us steady at 2%, are showing some level of increase. It is impossible to grow a political party overnight in this country, and anybody who thinks so is somebody who hasn't even tried to set up a political party themselves. There are people coming to us in large numbers from Fianna Fáil, from Sinn Féin.
The two parties that were set up, and PDs, you can perhaps call them a split, but the PDs and the Green Party are the two parties in the past few decades that were set up and had a noticeable impact on the political landscape, albeit with the PDs, they are now extinct. The reason that they were hold on. The reason that they were able to do that, the reason that they were able to do that was they had an extremely clear message. You could characterize, maybe not correctly, but you could characterize both the PDs and the Green Party in a sentence. And it's not clear to me that you can do that with Aontú. And you're sort of saying, well, we have somebody who says this and we don't agree with her. And
we support life, unity and economic justice.
I can't see anything that anybody could disagree with on that. That doesn't tell me how you can distinguish yourself from the rest of the body politic. But in the event that you came back from the next election, and let's say you did fantastically well, and you had half a dozen TDs, and a Sinn Féin-led, perhaps left-wing government was a couple of seats short of a majority, would you see yourself going in?
Well, we would sit down with Sinn Féin and any other political party to discuss, could our political platform be implemented? On this occasion, we sat down with Sinn Féin to discuss with them potentially developing a government. We sat down with Fianna Fáil, we sat down with Fine Gael. We met with some of the independents as well, and we would be happy to do so in the future. Listen, there's no point in being involved in politics to be an opposition TD. If you want to achieve the change that we want to achieve, if we want to achieve economic justice, to try and make sure that there is a proper housing and healthcare and education for people, if you want to focus on regional development, which is completely lopsided at the moment, if you want to focus on trying to make sure that we have a positive attitude towards life rather than a negative one in this country, you need to be in government. And we will sit down with those political parties. And incidentally, I can remember when Sinn Féin were at 2%. I can remember when the Greens were at 2%. And I would actually say that our growth has been quite strong in a very short space of time. And we're looking forward to the next election.
We'll see. Peadar Tóibín, TD, leader of Aontú, thank you very much for talking to me.
Thank you.
Make your view heard. Record your own contribution and email it to podcast@here'show.ie. You can find tips on how to record a good contribution and other ways to contact the podcast at here'show.ie/call.
Go to the website for sources and references from the show. And while you're there, you can like the show on Facebook, follow the show on Twitter @Here's How Podcast, and follow Peadar Tóibín @Tóibín1, and get in touch with me if you can suggest a guest or a topic for a future show. And thanks again to all the patrons on Patreon. Their donations allow me to devote time to research and finding interesting guests. And if you could do the same as them and donate $1 or $2 per podcast or per month, please go to patreon.com/here'show. That link is on the website, and there you can find out how to subscribe to the podcast for free on your computer, on your phone, or by email. All that information is at www.here'show.ie. The Here's How podcast is produced and presented by me, William Campbell. Thank you for listening.